Well, good morning to all. I'm sorry for speaking first because, as you can see, Pat McCart is by my side this morning, and he, of course, in terms of beauty and intelligence, should have been first. Right, Pat? The floor is yours.
Jesus,
Come
terms of beauty,
on.
Jesus. Modesty forbid. The
Uh, we, we
last time I
um,
was called beauty, I think I was sitting on my mother's knee or
I
something.
didn't tell you who I was comparing you to.
No, that's exactly the point. That's the worry.
Uh, anyway,
Anyway, how are you?
the reason we're side by side is the last couple of times, as you'll have noticed, dear viewer, the my lovely image filled the screen, but only Pat's voice. We're trying to rectify that. We're praying to God that this will do the job, and that at least you'll see the two of us smaller than we should be, but you know, big
Uh,
views, small man, big views.
by the way, if you saw me turning around there, I heard a noise. Our cats just jumped up in my car window. Anyway, go ahead.
I was
I
watching a
was wondering
series
what.
last. I was watching a series last night which featured a cat. I'm trying to remember what it
Uh,
was now. I think it was to do with a space race. That's what it was.
By the way, this I know this is good. Now. You didn't watch. I don't know when second part's on.
Yeah.
It's called The Rise and Fall of Michelle Moan. She was the woman that founded the Ultimo bra industry, and she came from a sort of humble background in Glasgow. And anyway, she founded this bra company. And anyway, but bottom line, Judith, she came from basically none. Obviously, a very, very driven woman.
Mm.
Anyway, the thing about it was that she ended up marrying. Her and her first husband divorced. She married this super rich guy, and what do you call him? They live on a yacht somewhere about the coast of
Uh-huh.
Monaco. But anyway, somewhere during COVID, she got a contract for 200 million. Her and her husband, and the stuff that they gave apparently was absolutely useless. And there's all sorts of investigation. But I was watching the first part. It was the rise of Michelle Moan on Monday or Thursday, Wednesday or Thursday night. I can't remember. No, Wednesday. And it was fascinating about how human beings can change from coming from poverty to living on a luxury yacht and so on. And the next part is the fall of Michelle Moon. She went from somebody who was quite popular now to someone who's sort of despised. She's denying all any sort of wrongdoing and all this sort of stuff. But it's fascinating about human nature,
Mm.
about how people can change. Here's this woman suddenly now uh, moving with coming from the back streets of Glasgow, uh, in the House of Lords. Um, her career seems to be on the ascent all the time,
Mm.
and
Mm.
then there's
Boom.
something very very dodgy about the
Mm.
fact that they got contracts for 200 million that
Pat,
didn't deliver things. So there's all sorts
yeah.
of allegations of put
Uh-huh.
it mildly wrongdoing.
Did you say bra, Pat?
Yeah, Brad.
Uh,
She she
I
she
hope that's
she
not the source of your interest in this particular life story.
no, no, it's a fascinating program, Jude. She copped on at women, who were sort of relatively flat chested, could suddenly appear voluptuous.
Mm.
And nobody else, you think all these playtechs and all these people who made millions would have people working this thing out. Sarah was this wee girl in the back streets of Glasgow. She says, wait a minute, I could do this. For some reason, she got these gel things and she put them into a bra and whatever. And on that basis, she is worth a couple of 100 million.
Well, you see, there'd be a market for it. But I remember the time, Pat, it must have been what would it have been? The early 70s? Yeah, early 70s, I'd say. And women not wearing bras was seen as a sign of liberation, women's liberation.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
in other words,
Jude, I was in 19, it was without getting too, I was in New York in 1972 when the new no bra look
uh,
was on its at its height. It was at its apex. It was during that whole hippie generation. And by God, there was many a day I had to remind myself to look at somebody's face.
well, that's true. In a way, I have some sympathy with women who said, "Oh, burn the bra and so on, because it's very obviously something that exists so that they'll look sort of traditionally, as you say, voluptuous. I mean,
Uh,
if you had to dress so
there's
you
a,
would
I,
look
there's a,
really sexy, Pat, I mean,
I,
there's more to you than that.
exactly. Well, two old men discussing bras, but the funny thing about the program was actually very, very good, Jude. It
Uh,
really was. In fact, I'm looking out for the second part of it now
okay, what's it
because
called
it it,
again?
it, it tells the rise and fall of Michelle Moan,
Uh-huh.
Mone.
And
It was a
what
very good program. I don't even know why it came into my head for some
hmm,
reason. Just because I was sitting watching, I was fascinated about the fact it reminded me so much of so many human beings who lose the run of themselves.
uh, uh, well, I
They
want you
start
to
off
now
with
try to avoid thinking about that. Otherwise, you could be leading you into sinful thoughts. Okay?
yes, absolutely,
So try
Father.
and make sure you're out. Okay, let's get back to
Right.
more serious things.
Yeah.
I'm not sure which one you want to start with, but one is our good old friend Stephen Collins is at it again.
Ah,
Oh, bashing the sinners. I've forgotten what they. Oh, here's the title. He says the title. They really have weird headlines in the Irish Times. I've always thought. This is the headline in his article. I think rise of backward-looking nationalism is not the preserve of the populist right. Just ask Sinn Féin. And he hangs this, this objection. He hangs it on the fact that there's going to be apparently, oh God preserve us, starting next year, I think, there's going to be a year of the Normans. Now, not
yeah.
Norman people, not individuals called Norman. We're talking about the Norman who invaded Ireland.
Normandy.
Aye.
Yeah.
And they were the first invaders of Ireland, but they were invited by Dermot McMurrough or somebody like that. Uh, so
Mm.
Stephen Collins's point is that Sinn Féin won't celebrate this occasion because they want to feel, along with a lot of others, to be the most oppressed people ever. And he
Okay.
uses this
I,
acronym MOPE,
uh,
MOPE. Uh, Clever, Stephen, I must say. If you can associate, you can hang a label mope around people's neck. People think, oh, you boring so and so. There you are. You're always moaning. You're always going moping around. Well, the facts of the matter, I did a check, and you probably learnt this at school. We learnt no Irish history, being in the occupied territory. But the Normans did oppress the Irish people. They're invited to invade, of course, by Dermot McMurrough. But when they came, like they really went to work. And it was through them that King Henry II of England came over and finished the job. Now, they eventually, after a couple of centuries, became assimilated with the Irish. And I think maybe it is about them that people said we're Irish and the Irish themselves. I'm not sure. I think that was
mm.
them. But they did
Yeah, I think it
things
was them too.
like
Yeah.
land seizure, legal and political marginalisation. The Brehon law system, legal system, for example, was abolished and English feudal law was put in its place. Culture was suppressed in terms of language, even of dress. Uh, Military conquest and violence. It really was one that was extremely brutal. A lot of sieges, a lot of massacres, a lot of destruction of um, of land and of possessions. Uh, so, although you could say that they assimilated eventually, the fact of the matter is that they were the first oppressors of the Irish people. So, I would suggest this. It's a bit like this deal where I'm sure people like Stephen wanted people to celebrate and put the names of all the RIC people up alongside the names of the people who fought to liberate Ireland, and it got a kick in the teeth because nobody would have it. I suggest the same sort of thing should happen to the Norman, the year of the Norman.
Yeah.
Am I being too pernickety now, or
No, you know, I think some of these West Brit media types in Dublin seem to think, if they ever had 50 years of maybe British rule around about, as I keep saying, Dublin, Cork, or Dublin, Wexford, and all the rest, they might have a different attitude. But secondly, Jude, the point of it is, this thing that sneering the most oppressed people ever.
yeah?
What do you call her? Ruth Dudley Elliott.
Oh,
Used to use that as well. Irish people. Jude, we have a history of oppression and colonization. Our leaders were hanged. Our immigration and poverty were. It's not anybody saying anything that's historically untrue. So let's get that on the record for a start. Secondly, a lot of Stephen Collins, this absolute rubbish he keeps coming out with all the time about Sinn Féin. By the way, one of the things he said is the fact that Irish people over the years have voted so much in Eurovision for Britain proves that there's not this hatred. Dude, that is one of the most moronic point that you or I could ever make. That there's this some sort of way proves the point. Here's the point, Jude. Would I vote for somebody from Poland whose language I haven't a clue what he's saying, or for Cliff Richard who's singing "Congratulations" written by Phil Coulter, or would I say for Sandy Shaw or whatever, or, somebody I can understand. I'm
Yeah.
Irish. I can understand what the guy from England's singing about. The song seems familiar to me. No, do I vote for some sort of guy singing in Italian, which I haven't a clue what he's singing about, or somebody from Poland? So that sort of rubbish. He sort of said, by the way, that proves that Ireland is not as, no, what would you say, antagonistic towards the British and all the rest. But the whole thing, Jude, it's a joke.
Well,
Basically, remember, as you referred to the time that they wanted to put up the names of the RIC on the wall, the same as the IRA, or not the IRA, the Irish people had been shot dead by the British. Jude, in occupied France, they don't put up the names of the French who cooperated with the Germans. They shot them.
yeah. Besides that, I would have thought that that notion that say, oh well, look, there's they vote for the English in the Europe. There's something funny about that, They vote for the English in the Eurovision Song Contest, but sure, does that not suggest their superiority rather than their
Yeah,
mopiness? They're saying,
yeah.
despite what England did to us over the years, we're listening to this song. Yeah, it sounds like a good song. I will give them the vote. In other words, you're not prejudiced against
Nothing
them.
to do with it. Yeah,
But anyway, I
yeah.
just think it's about time Stephen Copperfield. Well, actually, I hope
Ah,
he
it's just
doesn't.
Jude, that there. I don't even know what's the right word to describe it. It's petty on the extreme to try and hang that in Sinn Féin. Like Sinn Féin says, look, we're not getting involved. Suddenly now they're right wing populists. They're joining Nigel Farage. Jude, a slave doesn't celebrate his master, does he?
No, that's true. Anyway, he should open his bloody eyes that they Sinn Féin and people who are Republican or nationalists in their background, they don't do anything other than have a pride in their country. And the fact he's talking about a period in history, and he's wrong. He's simply wrong. Do a check and you'll
Yeah,
see the Normans invaded Ireland, and they suppressed the culture. They suppressed the people. They took over the legal system. They were invaders, of course. And then
yeah,
after a couple of centuries, they became Anglis or Gaelicized. That's good. That's fine. But all of that is fact
mm,
and history. It's not a question of opinion. So, really,
yeah,
Stephen shouldn't be trying to twist history like that. Anyway, I
yeah,
think have we
yeah.
kicked Stephen enough for this time?
That's enough for Stephen.
Let's give him
Uh,
a final kick
Jude,
there,
I
Pat.
like your one your one about Israel. I wrote that. You see, I have a thing. What's that? The way there's when you're the words you have that problem with words. Well, I've got that problem with numbers. Anyway, Israel. The Israelis they did a survey, Jude, about the Israelis. I'd love your opinion on this. 39% of Israelis polled said in regard to Gaza that 39% Israel had got it about right, and Gaza right. 34 said that the Israeli army had not gone far enough, and 19% only 19% had gone too far. What do you make of those figures?
Oh, Jesus. I mean, you just despair. Less than one fifth of the people disapprove of what they're doing. How in the name of
Yeah.
God? Where did they leave their humanity?
Mm.
They simply must, honestly. I mean, of course, maybe they're not getting these pictures. Do you think? Are they getting? They're not
No,
evolution. They're
apparently
not.
not yet. They're not. No,
Well,
apparently they're
maybe
not.
that's part of it. You see, if you just think of yourself as being at war, if you've seen the pictures of the invasion of Israel by Hamas, then maybe that's what you carry in your head. Oh, it's not awful. It was pretty awful. So maybe that's what they carry on through, and we'll really punish these people. And our army's pushing them back, and that's great to suppress them. We're having to sue for peace, and I've got to hand over the hostages and so on. But it's the old thing about showing part of the picture or showing the full picture. And it's
Yeah.
outrageous that they wouldn't. Well, maybe it's not. Maybe it's not. I was going to say it's outrageous that they wouldn't show their own people the truth. But I mean, nobody's going to do that except the Americans made that mistake. They made that mistake with Vietnam. They let the cameras
I
in.
was watching. I was watching Piers Morgan. Believe it or not, Piers Morgan was actually is quite good in the whole Gaza thing, or has become quite good. Maybe not so good earlier on, but he had on the Israeli ambassador to London. I can't remember Hot Fenley, I think Hovetlny or something like that. Anyway, she said she came on and she said that we have killed so many terrorists. When asked how many innocent civilians, oh, she didn't know. And Pierce says, I find that amazing. He says, you could come on here and say how many, you can tell us how many people, terrorists you've killed. But when you're asked directly how many children you've killed or how many women you've killed, you don't know. Jude, in other words, they're sort of saying, we've killed 20,000 terrorists and all the rest to justify the war. But they can't then tell how many innocent women and children they've killed because that doesn't suit the propaganda effort. Because, in other words, you're guilty of mass murder. Dude, they dropped a £2,000 bomb on an apartment, killing apparently more than 100 people to get one Hamas leader. Now, Jude, you tell me, in any sense of proportionality or morality or whatever term you want to use, that isn't acceptable. In other words, 99 or no, sorry, 100, it was more than 100 people died to get one man. And there's this sort of absolute crap going from the Israelis. Jude, the Lancet, the medical journal, said some time ago that the figures would be much worse now. That the whole methodology of checking the dead is wrong. They were saying, Jude, 6 months ago or thereabouts, that there was about 62,000 people dead even then, because apparently there's so many people buried under the rubble that that's when they'll get the rest of the bodies.
I think this has sickened everybody who isn't directly involved on the side of the Israelis. I mean, I've spoken to people who would not have a political opinion ever about anything, and they have raised this
Yeah.
subject about Gaza. I think it's an outrage. I think the United Nations, if they don't follow up and arrest people and punish them, they are absolutely disgraced. They haven't a shred of humanity or a shred of credibility. Incidentally, I don't know if you've seen, there's a series on, I'm not sure if it's Sky or what it's on, but it's a series of interviews conducted by David Frost over the years.
Yeah.
I think I mentioned it before, and he does the Beatles and he does all sorts of people that were big at the time, Muhammad Ali and so on. The one that I watched last night was about David Frost and the Middle East. And he
Mhm.
he interviewed the leader of Israel at the time. I've forgotten his name, and the leader of the Middle Eastern Palestinians. And his name was a household name.
Rabin and Arafat
Rabin
by any
and
chance?
what was the guy's name?
Ar- Yasser Arafat?
Yasser Arafat. That's absolutely you're good. You have a much better mind than mine. Anyway, I used to remember things too, but if your time will come, you'll forget them.
Yeah,
Anyway,
no,
he
absolutely.
interviewed them, and the thing that was really interesting was he said at one point to, I think it was Rabin or one of the ministers, that there had been a killing of quite a few Palestinians in a clash with the IDF. And Frost said to the guy, "Don't you realize that for every one of those that you killed, you're giving birth to 100 more who will be seeking
Yeah,
revenge?" Now, if that was the case then, my God, they'll have to wipe the Palestinians out completely. And that's what they look like they're trying to do because people will carry such a grudge that it'll go on forever. And they won't want to
yeah,
arrive at a two-state solution. The interesting thing was that Rabin was the guy who managed, along with was it Bill Clinton or whoever, to
uh,
forge a pact and a two-state solution. What happened to Rabin? He was killed.
he
The
got shot
Israelis
by
shot him
a
dead.
settler.
Shot him
Yeah,
dead.
assassinated.
Honest to God, you simply
I
remove
see.
them.
There was the deal was the Oslo Accords was that Israel would recognize the Palestinians would recognize Israel, and that was the deal. Rabin went back home and was assassinated by a fanatical settler. The whole Oslo Accords fell into disrepute, and Hamas arose saying, like, no matter what these people do, we're not going to get a deal. And everybody's points, but the whole thing about Israel broke those accords. They didn't deliberately break them; it just fell into disrepute. After Rabin, nobody pushed their accord, so the whole thing is just fell. So the dispute kept growing and growing. Anyway, Jude, let's move on.
And I don't know,
President
hold on,
Higgins.
no, sorry, just one other thing I want to say about this. That
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
program talked about
Yeah,
how the state of Israel was set up and how
yeah,
they simply said, okay, we'll take this land off the Palestinians and we put the Israelis into it. And that's a legal state. Now, that was at the heart of the problem we face today. Israel says, oh, yeah, the right thing because God in the Bible says that this is the land of Israel.
yeah,
Bullshit. Bullshit. And all right, we might have to accept that, but we shouldn't forget it. That's where the
Yeah,
trouble began, when the international community assigned a land what was Palestine as part of,
yeah.
well, it's all of the Israeli state. And Israel is going to take over every inch of Palestinian territory and make it their own.
What's your today this week? 22 new settlements announced in the West Bank.
And last
There's something
night
like
was
a
60
hundred or
people
what?
killed. Nobody gives a shit. Nobody gives a shit.
Yeah, nobody gives a shit. It was the guy, and I can't remember the name. The guy in the Knesset last week. He said, "Hey, look, we killed 100 Palestinians last night. Nobody cares." But anyway, let's get
Okay,
on.
let's go on.
President Higgins said that earlier this week. He was speaking in Dublin. He said it's now reached this. He says he personally has been targeted by Israel for condemnation for speaking out and so on. And he says they're using this thing that if you criticize Israel, you're anti-Semitic. He says he resents and rejects that totally. He says criticism of Israel is totally, completely, and utterly legitimate. But he says he is the victim of a propaganda campaign by Israel. Right. Let's move on. Donald Trump. Last night I heard him talking he said about Harvard. He says it's become the hotbed of anti-Semitism. Basically, in America, they deliberately, totally conflate criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism. In other words, Israel should be allowed to bomb thousands of kids, thousands of women, thousands of innocent people, but don't you dare say it's they're that it's anti-Jewish, because that's not fair.
Mm.
Dude, if Israel is killing people, you're totally within your rights 100% to criticize Israel. And if people want to interpret that as anti-Semitism, be my guest.
Yeah, yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's ridiculous that they're allowed to get away with this kind of thing. But I think they've picked, as far as Irish people are concerned, the wrong target when they picked Michael D. Because Michael D is, as they say, a national treasure. I have
Uh,
I have made some reservations about him, but he is a fine man in that respect, and he speaks up. The other guy who speaks up, and if it's well worthwhile, I would urge people to go onto YouTube and see it. Bernie Sanders, get him to talk about
yeah,
what's happening. He
absolutely.
will talk about Gaza, and he speaks the truth. Uh, isn't it such a pity that there aren't more people like um, Sanders? I mean, he talks sense about the way America should be run. He talks sense about how the international community should be run. And yet, he's passed
Mm,
over. Oh, geez, he's too extreme, too socialist. But he's managed to get around that. There was a time when if you said you were a socialist
yeah,
in America, that meant you were a communist. He's sort of
yeah,
proved that wrong, and he's so feisty and he's so clear and strong, and the very
yeah,
opposite actually of poor Joe Biden, who's a frail sort of character,
yeah,
roughly the same age.
yeah,
So
yeah.
anyway, I think they picked the wrong target when they picked Michael D. And it just shows
Well,
the
there was two things and I didn't watch Question Time last night. I just couldn't be arsed, dude. This morning, I was sitting, just flicking through social media, and I think it was from last night's Question Time.
Mm.
There was a lady in the audience, and there was a Labour MP on the panel. And this woman, she said, "I find it hard to sit here and listen to you." She says, "When she says, why are we still friends with Israel? Why, and when they're bombing babies to bits, destroying entire society?" And this Labour MP, I wish I could remember her name, but I was in a hurry at the time. And I presume she's a minister of some kind. She
Mm.
said it's a horrific. And your woman started to shout, "Why don't you do something about it?" And Fiona Bruce, hey, without question, Fiona Bruce ran shotgun for the minister. She said, "Okay, you keep quiet until the minister answers." The passion from the woman was far superior to the bland answer from the Labour minister. But anyway, the Labour person on, anyway, she almost started broke down. She says, "They break my heart when I see those babies and the destruction and all the rest." And the woman repeated again, "Do something about it." Dude, I think there's a tide turning, but it's way, way too late. The damage is done. It's like, shooting somebody up with poison and then saying, "Look, here's the antidote," when they're ready to die.
And I mean, well, you see, Starmer said, "Oh yeah, that Israel had the right to withhold water and food and so on." In other words,
And he denied it afterwards.
well, that goes par for the course. Him and
It's
Boris,
on the records. Yeah,
yeah, him and
yeah.
Boris Johnson are a pair. Okay, well, let's leave the Middle East reluctantly because you could talk forever about it, and it sickens my soul. That's the truth. Let's talk about something really
Uh,
nice. The PSNI, Pat. Now there's a topic. There's a
yeah.
topic. Did you know that since between 2020 and March of this year, there were 1,377 officers recruited for our, not your,
Well,
our police service. Now, I stress service now. They serve us. They don't force us. They serve us. But of the officers who were recruited during that time, 76. Actually, it's a bit like Israel on what they think of the job that
uh,
the IDF is doing in Gaza. 76, more than 76% came from a Protestant background, while just over 21% came from a Catholic background. And Liam Kelly, who's the chair, not the name Liam Kelly, the chair of the Police Federation for Northern Ireland, says it really is all the fault of the politicians. Politicians should be encouraging Catholic people with Catholic backgrounds to join the PSNI. Well, I would ask the question, why aren't they joining? Is it because they have to wait for
mm.
their politicians to tell them? I suspect it's something more than that. Would you have any thoughts on what it might be? Because
Judah, I
joining
think
was once a good idea, considered a good idea by
I
Republicans and nationalists.
Jude, there's guys from the north joining the Gardaí down south, so it's not that. Jude,
Well, that's a different
I
matter,
think
Pat. That's
there's
a different matter. That's a different.
I know, but here's the point I'm making, Jude. I think the core issue is that in the nationalist community, they still think the PSNI might have changed its name from the RUC, but basically it's the same force. Oh, it's just a different name. Now there might be all sorts of things changing and all the rest. But here's the point. Like I'll use a simple example, and you might say it's unfair, or maybe PSNI supporters will say. Last week, two wee women outside a bank were arrested for allegedly putting a pro-Palestinian sticker on a bank machine. And the cops come along and arrest them. And the cops lifted the PSNI, or not the PSNI, the Palestinian flag. Yet they can put up, loyalists can put up flags for the UAVF, which is an illegal organization, on the outskirts of Catholic areas and whatever. And when the police are approached about taking them down because they're intimidatory or whatever, they say it's not our job and it's not, it's not politically correct for us to do it, and so on, so on, so on. So if you're a young nationalist sitting somewhere in West Belfast or the Bogside in Derry saying, wait a minute, they can arrest wee women for protesting about Palestine. But see these guys running around like Winky Winston, or what they call the guy who got a short sentence there recently
uh,
for having guns and all the rest of it. You're saying this whole society still seems to treat loyalists with a different sort of standard than they do anybody else. The other thing as well, Jude, not the REC was up to its eyeballs in collusion with loyalists. So if you're an 18 or 19-year-old Patsy Doherty sitting in the bogside, are you thinking you're going to be wild happy joining Sammy Clements or whatever the hell his name might be, and he's from a loyalist background, Belfast background? You know, the PSNI has to do a lot more to make itself acceptable and to absolutely illustrate fairness. They haven't done that.
in some ways, I think PSNI mirrors how the unionists have handled things since 1998. In 1998, we were setting up a shared parliament,
Yeah,
sharing power, and we would only decide about a united Ireland whenever there was a time for it, and then we'd vote. And I think most nationalists would go along with that. And maybe some who wouldn't, but the I'd say a majority of people definitely thought that was good. And they voted for it, for God's sake, so they must have wanted it. That chance is gone. People
yeah,
don't believe anymore that unionists are flexible or reasonable, who want to establish a society where people can easily interact. They've thrown that chance away. The PSNI had exactly the same chance when this fresh new force. I remember seeing it. They even got different kinds of uniforms, different caps, and
yeah,
everything.
yeah,
And meanwhile, the RUC were howling that they should keep the name somehow, so they buried it somewhere in the
yeah,
vaults. Somehow or another, we attached the PSNI. But the point is, they at first were really, really good. They were courteous, they were friendly, they were all you could ask for from a police service. And bit by bit, they got past it. They did things that actually antagonized people in the nationalist community. How many of the people who are now in the PSNI are Catholic and senior figures? I don't want just any
Uh,
token figure. I want what's the percentage, say, if you take the top quarter of the PSNI, right, in terms of seniority,
uh,
how many of those are Catholics, are from
mm,
Catholic background? We know bloody well already that there's very few. So I think they had a wonderful chance and they just blew it away. And there's nothing we can
mm,
do about it, not a thing.
mm.
Why they did it, I don't know. Maybe it's just force of habit, you think, or
Do you remember there was a protest about the killings at the bookie shop
yeah, yeah.
in the Falls Road, and they
Jeez.
arrested the people who were protesting peacefully because they said they'd broken some sort of flags or rules or something. And then a couple of days before that, had been a big loyalist parade, zero arrests. Dude, that is the sort of thing that really pisses people off. And Jude, you can't sell that to young nationalists. The politicians can say whatever they like, but somewhere, and I don't know what level a level within your body, you just say, I'm not playing this game. And the politicians can say all the right things, and the Secretary of State Hilary Benn can say this. Your guy, the chief constable, can say Catholics are welcome and please come and join us. But it's not working. Young Catholics are
Well,
just saying,
I,
no, we don't. The body language from the PSNA is not for us.
it's more in the body language. You mentioned the Ormo Road there and the commemoration, that massacre there. One of the people they
Yeah,
arrested was one of the guys who was in the bookies and who was
yeah,
wounded.
and yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, could you
yeah.
think of a stupider thing to do than that? And,
They
people
were doing
remember
nothing
these
wrong.
things.
It was a totally peaceful protest, and
Uh,
they arrested them.
uh,
You know,
well, there you go, there you go, there you go. Well, we've only a few minutes left, but I think we should squeeze in Nigel Farage. There's an article in the
somebody should.
Irish Times today, and it's about Farage, and they're saying he's clever. If you look at him compared to Starmer, he knows
Yeah,
exactly who the people are that are favorably disposed towards him. He knows what they want, he knows what they hate, and he makes good and sure that they get the stuff that they ask for or they're looking for.
yeah,
Uh, the article makes a point, and it's true, I'm sure, that although he presents himself as an ordinary Joe, and he's always been seen in a pub with a pint in his hand, and in fact, he doesn't drink at all now, hardly ever. But again and again, he'll have
mm,
that image of the bloke that was nice. And the way things are going, he's going to be the next Prime Minister of the UK.
yeah,
I hope so, because if he does, that'll hasten the day when there'll be an All Ireland poll. I'll tell you that.
yeah,
My son.
yeah.
Have you a soft
Dude,
spot for it, Nigel?
it really is funny. What?
Have you a soft spot for little Nigel?
I have a soft spot for Nigel. I just haven't dug it yet. But anyway, uh, Nigel, um, he's what do you say about Nigel, Jude? There's parts of him you can understand why he's popular, but there's definitely a thing of racism and
Oh,
keep he said right. Some of the things he's saying are unbelievable. Like you think policy was written on the back of a fag packet or something like that. He says he's going to clear absolutely all waiting lists on the NHS. He's going to invest totally in what is it? He's going to send all the boats back, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He's going to restore the two child whatever it is thing that no that the
yes,
Labour took
yes,
away.
yes, yes.
He's going to give away winter payments. Apparently, they said that this would be what do you call your woman? The shortest loved prime minister. They said this will be her on steroids. Financially, he
Yeah,
said what he's going to do is insane.
it's
That
trust.
but hey, not and he they said he plays this one the same as Boris Johnson. That that it's all he's incompetent, he's lacking in professional, and so on. And people don't expect from no way. Johnson played the buffoon thing,
Yeah, yeah. He always
no,
learned his lesson from him. What
uh,
amazes me is he was Mr. Brexit. He was even more
uh,
Brexit than Boris was. Mr. Brexit, he said,
uh,
Freedom Day. And have
uh,
people not learnt their lesson? they put
yeah,
stuff on the side of a bus saying 300 million every week to the
yeah,
NHS,
yeah,
and all the sunny uplands,
yeah,
like, all these deals we can do. And meanwhile, the British economy is falling apart. And in fact, the UK, I
yeah,
suggest, is falling apart. But people don't seem to mind. Why is that? Is it
yeah.
do they get a hex on them? They get an emotional stranglehold on them or what?
Uh, I don't know, Jude. There's a one of the guys. I think he's a columnist in the Financial Times, and apparently he was quite pro Brexit in 2016.
Yeah.
And they compared a headline of an article he wrote in 2016 to one he wrote. He basically said Brexit is a total disaster, that the economy is flatlined. We're losing the biggest market. We're losing power. We're losing friends, etc., etc. And we're aligned with a lunatic in the White House.
Well,
So Jude, a lot of that has changed.
we'll have to talk about that, Pat, some stage, because if you stop to think about it, what Farage is offering to the Brits, Trump offered to the people of the US, and they both grabbed it
Yeah,
with both hands. So what the
yeah.
hell how do they do it? How do they do it? If you're a politician and could get that sort of bottled, you'd have it made. Pat, the time's very
I
nearly up,
no,
so
no,
if you want to
Jude,
say anything else,
it's like this. The Sun reader, uh, Farage and Trump know what people hate. That's the big
I guess
thing.
so. I guess so. Okay,
Yeah.
Pat, don't you hate anybody.
Okay,
Go out.
Jude.
There's a
Uh,
powerful hate
all the
today.
best.
There's a powerful hate out there. You, you
See
get
you
it?
later.
Get it?
Good
Hate,
luck.
hate, hate.
I got a hit right there.
Okay, right. Bye. Bye.